So, how the heck is this gonna work? Welcome, everybody, to JG9 News, where we talk all things NFL all the time. I'm Jared Gear 9, representing the 904 from the 602, and today we are talking about the next possible international expansion for the National Football League. We've seen the NFL play regular season games in a lot of countries before, starting with the United Kingdom in 2007, and then going into Canada with the Bills Toronto series, Mexico in 2005. That was really the thing that started it all. But in terms of overseas expansion outside North America, we've had the United Kingdom. We're going to have Spain soon. We have Germany. We're going to have Brazil this year with the Eagles-Packers game. And now we're going to reportedly have Australia. That is right. The NFL is going to a brand new continent, a brand new country, as after playing a preseason game there in 1999 between the San Diego Chargers and the Denver Broncos, it looks as though the NFL is going to play a regular season game during the 2025 season in Australia at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. This according to a report from Tom Morris of 9 Melbourne, who says that talks are underway with the NFL and the MCG. He says the MCC, in conjunction with the Victorian government, is exploring the possibility of bringing a regular season game to the Melbourne Cricket Ground, or MCG. Discussions are in the early stage. I understand the Rams are slated to host, given their presence in Australia already. It's understood that the NFL is only keen to play the very best stadiums, which of course the MCG is. Now, I'll talk about the Rams possibly hosting in a different video, because I don't see how that would happen necessarily, seeing as in an odd number year, it's the AFC that has 9 home games, the NFC that has 8, so we know that an AFC team would have to host. Having said that, though, how would this even work logistically speaking? I have no clue whatsoever how a game in Australia would work. First off, I don't even know what they're talking about. You can tell this is the very early preliminary stages, because the report says that the match would be played between October 2025 and February 2026. That's right, February 2026. How the heck would they even play a game in February 2026? The only game that's taking place in February 2026 in the NFL is the Super Bowl. Unless they move the Super Bowl to Melbourne, that's not happening. Unless they just randomly decide to take one of the conference championship games and move that to Melbourne, which I'm sure would take off a lot of people, that's not happening. Unless they're playing the Pro Bowl in Australia, but no, they're playing a regular season competitive game. So obviously, there's some things that have to be worked out. Now, I would say this shouldn't be a problem logistically if you were playing the game in September, because I was going to say it makes total sense. You could do it like you did with Brazil. You play the game on what would be Friday night in America. You played at 9 o'clock Eastern time, which would be 11 a.m. on Saturday in Melbourne, and you play the game during the first week, and you circumvent the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961, because that only takes effect beginning the second Friday, similar to the Brazil game, what they're doing. That's how they can circumvent the act, because the Sport Broadcasting Act of 1961 says that you cannot televise a game that takes place on a Friday or a Saturday if it is within 75 miles of any high school or college football game. And obviously, with how many high schools there are in the country, how many colleges there are in the country, it basically means the entire country will not be able to watch the game. So that is why the act exists, and that is why you have to take that into account. And if the game was being played in September, all right, no issues there. The time difference with New York is 14 hours, so like I said, you play the game at 9 p.m. Eastern on a Friday, the first Friday of the month, at 11 a.m. on a Saturday in Melbourne. You could even do a potential doubleheader with the Brazil game and the game in Melbourne. I'm not sure that's the best move, because I was sure Roger Goodell would want to be at both games, but it is possible that you could do that. But if the game's not going to be played in September, how is this going to work? Because according to the reports, they can't play the game at the Melbourne Cricket Ground in September because the AFL, Australian Rules Football, that league has its grand final, and the grand final has access to the MCG. For those who don't know Australian Rules Football, basically the AFL grand final is the Australian equivalent of the Super Bowl. So they need time to get the cricket ground ready, and they need time to get it situated for that event. They don't want the field being destroyed by the NFL. So if that stadium's booked and you want to play at the MCG, how on earth is this going to work? If the game was being played at Sydney, if this game was being played at any other stadium, okay, no issues. You can get around the yak pretty quickly. And yeah, there'd be some travel issues and concerns, obviously. Time zone differences you have to work out, but you can make it work. But if you're playing the game at the MCG, I don't know how logistically you can make this work. The game would have to start at 9 p.m. Eastern on the East Coast. Any other time, because it's a 14-hour difference, would be unreasonable to the people of Australia. They would not be able to go to the game. And any early time in America wouldn't work because it would be too late in Australia unless you genuinely want to start a game at 6:30 a.m. on the East Coast, 3:30 on the West Coast, which I'm sure you don't want to do that. You can't do this as a Thursday night game because the players would not have enough time to get their bodies adjusted. So let's say you want to play the game at 9 p.m. Eastern on a Thursday night, make it a TNF game. How is that going to work? You leave Sunday night, you land what would be a Monday night in Melbourne, you have a game on Friday afternoon in Melbourne, Friday morning, really? You can't have a game during the workday. That's not possible. You can't do it as a Friday night game into Saturday morning in Melbourne because that violates the Sport Broadcasting Act of 1961. You can't do it as a Saturday game going into Sunday for the same exact reason. You can't do it as a Sunday game going into Monday because no matter what time you played on Sunday, if it's on Monday, a work day in Australia, and you wouldn't get people to go to the games. There's only 2 possible ways you can make this work. Actually, 3 possible ways, and I'm not sure they want to do any of them. Option number 1, you make it a Monday Night Football game where it would be held on the first Tuesday of November. The reason for that is because that is Melbourne Cup Day, and it's a public holiday in Victoria. So people would have off of work, people would have off of school. Now, granted, do they want to interfere with the Melbourne Cup? I'm not entirely sure, but that is a possibility where you don't violate the Sport Broadcasting Act of 1961. Option number 2 is you could play the game on the 3rd Saturday of December and just give teams a super duper late bye week. Again, not ideal. It would be extremely messy having teams with an uneven number of games going into the final 2 weeks of the regular season. Make the playoff scenario. It's very, very wonky, very, very weird for the casual fan, but you could do it. I mean, teams did have bye weeks when they had 31 teams. They had bye weeks later in the season. Sometimes they had it the final week of the season because there was nothing you could do. It was out of necessity. So you could do that, have it as a standalone slot you could sell off that doesn't interfere with the Sport Broadcast Act of 1961. But those are really the only 2 possibilities, and both those possibilities are not very good options if they were so hell-bent on playing at the MCG, because I just don't see how this would work. If you can't use the venue in September, you have to worry about the Sport Broadcasting Act of 1961, and you have to worry about the time zone differences. That's really the key, is the time zone, not necessarily the travel. Again, going from LA to Germany versus LA to Sydney, it's not really too much of a difference. It's the time zone difference they have to worry about, and there's nothing that is convenient for the NFL. At the end of the day, the NFL is about making money, and the TV ratings will not be great if you're playing the game at a weird time. And if you play the game at a normal time in America, then you're violating the Sport Broadcasting Act, meaning that the game won't be able to be shown. Or if you play it on a day that doesn't violate the act, and you play it at a normal time in America, you're not going to get people to come to the game in Australia, and it's going to be all for nothing. So you're screwed either way. I don't know how this is going to work. Again, could a game work in Australia? Absolutely. I just don't see how it can work at the MCG unless they play the game in September during the first week of the season. And according to the reports, it doesn't look like that is a possibility. So, yeah, I got nothing. I genuinely got nothing. And I like coming up with hypotheticals. I broke down everything. I explained every possibility. I got nothing. I got absolutely nothing for how this would work if you have to play it at the MCG. So, we'll see what the NFL does. We'll see what the NFL decides to do when they play this Australia game. It seems like it's going to happen sooner rather than later, sometime in 2025 or 2026 at the earliest. But either way, NFL is expanding internationally. We'll see where they go to next, and we'll see how this Australia game goes. I don't even know what time they're going to play this game. I don't know what week. I don't know what day, but we'll see what the plan is. But what are your thoughts on the NFL going to Australia? Do you like the move? Do you not like the move? Do you think this is going to come to fruition? Do you think the game will be played at the Melbourne Cricket Ground? Do you think it will be played somewhere else? What teams do you think will play in the first Australia game when that time comes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And that is going to do it for this episode of JG9 News. Be sure you like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out my main channel, Jaguar9, where we talk all things NFL history all the time. Until next time, this is Jaguar9 signing off. And as always, go Jets.